Kia ora tātou, tēnā tātou katoa. Members, when we broke for the dinner adjournment, we were debating the taxation annual rates for 2017-2018, employment and investment income and remedial matters bill, if some member would care to seek the call. The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, I'm reliably advised that the previous Speaker, Mr Simon O'Connor, who preceded, it was the speech preceding me at the dinner break, made a Commonwealth record of a speech that lasted, I think, less than a minute. And that may be because, and I congratulate him on his recent marriage, that may be because now he's under the influence of higher authority, shall we say, that he's become far more efficient and eloquent than prior to the nuptials. Mr Speaker, this is yet another tax bill brought in by the government, and I note the Minister... Oh, congratulations. I hope you weren't late for the wedding. Anyway, so this is yet another tax bill that the government's put before us in respect of annual rates and other matters. I note the new Minister in charge of the Revenue, Judith Collins, is present, and as we go through this bill, I note that the first part, there is a substantial section that deals with the business transformation project and the technological changes within the Inland Revenue Department. And I will give notice on this side of the House that one thing we will explore, and we have explored as the IRD has come before us in various guises over the last few years, is to, and the IRD Commissioner, in fairness, has been quite forthright and respective, outlining the business transformation program that the IRD is going through. But one thing that the FEC, of which I'm a member, has touched on and wanted to explore and gain assurances on is that such a wide-ranging and extremely expensive technological input is on time, on budget, and will actually work. And we're mindful of Nova Pay. We're mindful, going back to the 90s with this government, or the then national government, of INSIS and other programs. And to be fair, I acknowledge that IT programs are particularly difficult, or they seem to be, far more difficult to manage within the public service than they do in the private sector. And we have had many experiences, of course, of spec creep, where at the end of the day the product you actually get has a whole series of other added bells and whistles that the consultants have persuaded the department to put on it, except the difficulty is it doesn't work. And we've seen that with Nova Pay, we've seen that with INSIS, as I say, in the 90s. So I'd be grateful and give notice to the Minister that we would like, and we will ask questions and seek assurances as to the nature of that program, because I agree it is vital. It is appropriate that, for instance, the IRD, I think, only recently started communicating with taxpayers in respect of email. In the old days, the law didn't allow that, and you had to communicate in writing. And one of the bugbears, I think, sir, and I think perhaps some of these issues in terms of business simplification may be dealt with in part in this bill, but one of the bugbears especially that small business has is that when there is a tax difficulty, 9.5 times out of 10 with a small business, it is a mess-up, it is a mistake. It is not an issue of criminality or fraud, it's just a mistake, because in respect of most small businesses, often it's the partner that sits at home under the bad light doing the books. And in the old days, I recall, sir, with the IRD, you could actually go, and it's been done away with now essentially, but it was a highly efficient process. It was called, you could go to the IRD and get in front of a human being, a tax specialist, with your files, sit there, and many of us have sent and had really good responses, I have to say, from the Inland Revenue in terms of sending small business people there to solve problems. You could get into somebody's face, you could explain the difficulty without letters flying back and forth through accountants and other representatives, costing an immense amount of money, and you could get the problem solved. Sadly, to a large extent, we don't have that ability for a business to make an appointment and see a human being. It has to go through the call centre, all these wonderful automated processes, which are great, but if you're a small business person out there and you're a specialist in making the widget or installing the product or whatever, that's your total focus, and anything that gets in your way, especially trying to deal with your tax arrangements, can be laborious, and many small business people would admit that they don't have the skills to do that. And equally, they don't have a lot of money often to go and just take the briefcase full of receipts and bills and bits and pieces, hand it to the accountant and say, can you sort it for me? So I would hope that the business transformation project, and my plea to the Minister, would be that as we drive for sort of wonderful technological efficiency and wonderful technical innovation, often with government agencies, many of those innovations are fantastic when it comes to the productivity and the efficiency and the ease of doing business for the agency. And often there's a gap between that and the practical effect, and we lose sort of touch with the practicalities of the customer, the client, the taxpayer, the small business person actually having to interface with the bureaucracy and interface with that technology. Not every small business is on MYOB. Not every small business can afford automated processes that will at some point plug into the IRD's business transformation program. Many small businesses still get the ledger book out because that's what they do. And so, as I say, I hope that in this wonderful transformation that there will be some thought, or has been some thought given to the practical application for that small individual called the taxpayer, the client, the customer serve. And in respect of costs of that, it would be helpful, I think, as we go through and as this bill is examined, and the FEC, I know, under Mr Bishop's sound stewardship, will be asking for justification in terms of costs. There are hundreds of millions of dollars utilised within this transformation program, and we also know that the budget for the business transformation program under a number of ministers, the longest serving revenue minister in the history of any Commonwealth Parliament, I believe, Sir, the Honourable Peter Dunn, who presided over it at a time when there was a cost blowout. We only found out about that, of course, when the Honourable Todd McClay got the high ball, missed the head high tackle, got the department under his portfolio, and we actually found out that there were some difficulties with this program, and sir, that the budget had blown out, I think, by several hundred millions of dollars. I think I debated that when I was our revenue spokesman some time ago. And the torch has now been passed to Judith, the Honourable Judith Collins, and I know in her own colourful, diligent and snappy way, pardon? And modest, humble, Ms Dyson says, and sort of, the ability to crack the whip, that I'm sure the Minister will be all over, sir, the expenditures, and she will be asking her at her weekly meeting, her officials, is it on time, is it going to work, is it on budget? And I hope that if her officials, as other government agencies have done, i.e. Novapay, come to her and say, oops, sorry, Minister, we've given you a series of assurances, but now we've got a problem and we need a few more pingers, a couple of $100 million more perhaps, or whatever, she may go back to them and say, no, this is the commitment you made, take it out of your baseline. And perhaps a bit of fiscal discipline around those sorts of projects, particularly Novapay, may have focused the minds of those who administer. Because there is another difficulty, I think. I've never been able to understand why certain government agencies, unlike the private sector, can contract, particularly for IT projects, can procure them, but somehow lose control of them. And when they don't work, again, unlike the private sector, who would go and either sue or have a very tight contract so they could gain recompense or compensation and pursue the supplier, for some reason, our procurement standards or our procurement policies, defence, I'd say, sir, is another one that's had an interesting and colourful set of experiences over the last 20 years, particularly around boats and other things. Somehow the taxpayer can't get recompense. The contract's too fuzzy, too muddled, too complicated, and we can't actually nail down who is responsible. The average person looks at these sorts of arrangements and says, well, if I buy a car and the car doesn't work, I'm entitled to a new car or my money back and perhaps some compensation for my time and suffering. It's a very simple principle. It actually works in the private sector reasonably well, but for some reason we get into such a tangle with these sorts of transformation and technology projects that often the poor old taxpayer is left holding the bill, but of course then there's a question of accountability. So, sir, we'll support this through, as we always do, in respect of tax bills, and I look forward to a robust examination of the features therein.
Members, the question is that the motion is agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Taxation, annual rates for 2017-18, Employment and Investment Income and Remedial Matters Bill, first reading.
The question now is that the Taxation Annual Rates for 2017-18 Employment and Investment Income and Remedial Matters Bill be considered by the Finance and Expenditure Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye, and against no. The ayes have it. I call on Government Order of the Day number 3.